President Maithripala Sirisena said that the Singaporean government must express their stance regarding the handing over of the chief suspect of the central bank bond scam to the government of Sri Lanka. The president made this statement at an event to launch the 5-year anti-corruption action plan with the aim to create a corrupt-free country. The 5-year plan to eradicate bribery and corruption was presented to the President by the Chairman of the Bribery Commission. The new 5-year action plan has been formulated by considering and rectifying shortcomings pertaining to weak laws, punishments for not declaring assets, and laws that weren't passed in Cabinet.
The reality is that we have been unable to find the respondent of the bond issue. I have to admit publicly that my trip to Singapore was more about finding out their policy in extraditing their citizen rather than attending the UN Environmental Summit. I spoke to their Prime Minister personally, but again, they have not made a clear statement yet. We informed Interpol and they have issued a red notice. The first respondent has then made an appeal to Interpol, saying that this is a politicized matter and that a wrong decision has been made. So he has requested that he not be released. Then they appointed a judge based on that appeal, and that judge has rejected Interpol's requests. This is the situation. I feel that Singapore's government are falling behind here. If not, the Singaporean government would have made a clear statement that this individual is no longer in the country.
What seems to be the question at hand? The question seems to be, where is Arjuna Mahendran? We have with us in the studio Faraz Shaukat Ali as well. Good evening to you, Faraz.
Very good evening.
The question that seems to be being raised by the President himself is, where is Arjuna Mahendran and why is Arjuna Mahendran not being brought to the country? In layman's terms, why is Arjuna Mahendran, who is supposed to be or believed to be in Singapore at the moment, not being brought to the country? Now, for us, I have here with me the laws pertaining to extradition practiced here in Sri Lanka based on the acts that are available for it, practiced in Singapore where Arjuna Mahendran is believed to be, and since we are Commonwealth countries, the act pertaining to the Commonwealth countries, which is called the London Scheme. Now, we have it in writing here. The act is very clear as to what should be done to get a person extradited if he or she is needed here in the country to be tried before the law. In the Singapore law, absolutely clear as to what needs to be done when a person needs to be extradited. Even better, it is also mentioned in the Commonwealth London Scheme as to what should be done. Now, I am going to take a moment and read the London Scheme, what is mentioned in the London Scheme here. It says, an offence described for the purpose of this scheme, an extradition offence is an offence, however described, which is punishable in the requesting and requested country by imprisonment for 2 years or greater penalty. Then it goes on to say for us, an offence described in paragraph 2 is an extradition offence, notwithstanding that the offence is of a purely fiscal character. Purely fiscal character. The bond scam was a purely fiscal character offence that had been carried out.
Absolutely.
And this is mentioned in the Commonwealth law. The extradition is mentioned in the Sri Lankan law and in the Singapore law. Now, for us, we are not lawyers. This is available on our website www.newsfirst.lk. After the news bulletin, anyone can go through this and understand what is being mentioned. Now, this is the exact same thing that the President is also raising in Parliament for us.
Indeed, indeed. Shall we, for a better understanding, I think it's necessary for us to briefly go on to tell you how this bond scam happened. Briefly, Ranil Wickremesinghe, as the new Prime Minister, imported somebody called Arjuna Mahendran from Singapore, a Singaporean national. The people of Sri Lanka don't even know whether he took the oath of office as a public official. His appointment was greeted with much dismay by several cabinet ministers and including President Maithripala Sirisena, who objected to his appointment. But Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe assured his colleagues, including the President of the country, that he would make sure that nothing untoward happened. And on those assurances, his appointment was then carried out. Now, several things come to our mind. The first of these, of course, is that for the first time in the history of post-independent Sri Lanka, the central bank was listed under not the Ministry of Finance, but under somewhere else. And that somewhere else was under the Ministry of National Policy Planning. The minister there was none other than Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe, the newly appointed Prime Minister. Now then, the rest of it is very simple. After the Prime Minister had his own way and insisted that Mr. Mahendran be the governor of the central bank, on the 27th of February, Mr. Arjuna Mahendran embarked on what is now better known as the bond scam, but he embarked on a solo mission.
Yes, Faraz. Now with all of this, who got affected is the innocent general public of our country.
Absolutely.
And that is because they were affected because the major loss was created through the bond scam to the EPF and the ETF, the public money who after retirement want to have a better life, retirement at home, and this was what was affected through the bond scam. With all of this, for us, we also hear that this was political revenge.
Yes, now political revenge seems to be the trending word in during these last 4 years.
We also remember Mr. Mahendran's father writing an article recently calling it political revenge as well.
Absolutely, and where he suggested that his son may not get a free trial. But the main thing here to remember is that this is what they say. This is the new trend. We see people making literally pilgrimages to places like the CID, the FCID, and the moment they come out, all they can say is that this is political revenge. All of them are forgetting the very fact that much of these monies, in fact all of these monies, has been virtually stolen from the people of this country.
For us, let's for a moment take it as it is and say there was political revenge. Why we are saying this is because I'm sure you remember last week when the budget overhead of the Prime Minister was being debated in Parliament, UPFA parliamentarian Vasudeva Nanayakara raised some explosive questions from the Prime Minister.
Absolutely. 22 powerful, fact-punched questions which clearly saw the Prime Minister quite literally squirm on his feet because he was most uncomfortable at answering those questions.
And in this situation, the Prime Minister made the statement saying that the bond scam was no fault of mine. We are not saying this. This was reported in the papers on Thursday itself.
That's right.
Big letters, headlines was that the bond scam was no fault of mine.
He said, bond scam, no fault of mine.
And when the Prime Minister of the country, who had not accepted that there was a scam before, accepts in Parliament that there was a scam, how can one identify that as a political revenge? That is the question that we have. If
Indeed.
the Prime Minister believes that this was a scam indeed, and how can they then call it a political revenge for us?
It's quite simple. This business about relying on political revenge or perceived political revenge will not get the country and its people anywhere. It's very simple, Chaturanga. All they have to do is to debate this in Parliament, and please remember that several debates have gone and they've passed all sorts of things, like 100 million for their elevators. But there are two matters that has not been debated in Parliament. One is the presidential report on serious allegations of fraud and financial crimes, and the second, of course, was the bond scam. Both these reports have not been debated in Parliament. And the question, Chaturanga, is why? What is so important about this that they are shy to talk about it?
Let's be very clear for us. The law is absolutely clear as to what needs to be done, the process that needs to be followed if Arjuna Mahendran is to be extradited back to the country. What is remaining is to present this before the Parliament, pass a motion, present a resolution before Parliament, get it approved and get Arjuna Mahendran into the country.
Chaturanga, I'd just like to take a moment to reveal something that many people don't seem to know. And that is that there is no extradition treaty, for example, between Singapore and China. But yet, using the available laws in both those countries, the Chinese government went after a provincial financial director of a Chinese national who had fled China and gone and taken up residence in Singapore. The Chinese pursued him relentlessly after having taken him to court in China and proved to the Singaporean authorities that he was a fraud and that he had received stolen monies. The Singaporean authorities actually jailed that Chinese provincial director of finance for 15 months. Thereafter, he was extradited to China, where he is today serving a sentence. Now, this is in spite and despite the fact that there was no extradition laws between those two countries, but there were plenty of other laws.
These are the examples that we see around the world. These are problems that affect the general public, the innocent general public, who are maybe not even aware of the things that are going on. But now the people are aware of the bond scam. Another major problem that was debated in Parliament was the issue pertaining to the dairy heifers. Let's have a look at what was said in Parliament today.
The heifers will produce 25 to 30 litres of milk. That is what the dairy farmers were told. That is why some of them have purchased cattle for 200,000 rupees. But now the condition has grown worse. The problem lies in the importation, which means they have not run medical tests on them. Out of the 2,995, 490 heifers have died due to contracting various diseases. So it is clear that this is a large-scale fraud. Some of the dairy farmers who ran their businesses well also have ended up in jeopardy now. I would like to ask first that will there be any program implemented to act against the importers?
We are suffering the repercussions of the big sin committed by the cows of the previous regime, Dayasiri Jayasekara. This importation of heifers started back in 2014 when Basil Rajapaksa signed an agreement for 20,000 heifers to be brought to Sri Lanka. Deputy Speaker, what should have been done is starting a pilot project before importing foreign dairy heifers to the country to see whether this will be successful or not. But the agreement was signed for those 20,000 heifers without doing that. Now we have stopped this temporarily.
No one is trying to cover up old deeds. So first tell those cows who dance while wagging their tails to stop and listen. There are cows in Bandarwala who wag their tails and dance in the morning. Therefore, I am not trying to cover up anything that happened in 2014. What those big cows did was wrong. There is no single place in this country where 25 to 30 litres were taken from those imported cattle. If you prove me wrong, I would resign and go. Only 7 to 8 litres of milk can be produced. First, take action against the people who initiated this and the people who gave permission for this.
MP Vasant is from Matale. 25 litres is produced from one heifer in his farm as well. You can call him and ask that. I do not say that in every farm that amount can be obtained, but both of us are not veterinarians. It is the veterinarians who pointed out that there is a lack of food consumption with these animals. This is an agreement reached between two countries. Therefore, we have presented facts to the Finance Ministry as well. The government should take a decision on the debt incurred from that project.
Minister, the problem here is the heifers taken by Lakshman Vasanta Pereira and Vijit Vijayamuni produce better milk than the rest. You can easily obtain 25 to 30 litres from their cattle. But the heifers purchased by businessmen and the dairy farmers can only produce 7 to 8 litres of milk.
That is not the problem. There is a problem with the food given to the animals. The reason that the heifers taken by Lakshman Vasanta Pereira produce better milk than the rest is because of the care given to them.
Well, this is a terribly sad situation, because what you just saw was not something from the Comedy Channel. In fact, this was our parliament, your parliament, where our elected and sometimes appointed legislators have turned it into one great big joke. A joke to hide corruption, and a joke to hide their inability and their unwillingness to get to the bottom of this story. A very important story, because it is the people's monies that are at stake, not their personal dowry or anything like that. It is the people's money.
Absolutely, Faraz. We remember in the past how a Secretary of the Ministry of Rural Economic Affairs signed 4,000 million rupees, 4 billion rupees as an advance payment to get dairy heifers down to the country.
I think we need to repeat that figure again. 4,000 million rupees. Put it another way, 4 billion rupees.
What is even more sad for us is the fact that we do not know what happened to those dairy heifers or the cows, or what happened to the money. Now, this particular secretary to the ministry retired. She did this before she retired. This was the last thing that she did. And she is also the wife of the secretary to the Prime Minister of the country. This is the sad situation, and we are talking about money that is in the tune of 4 billion rupees. And this is how our parliamentarians speak about it, debate about it in Parliament. This is indeed a sad situation, And I think I'll be correct in saying, Faraz, that this Parliament and this debate that took place today with regard to this problem is an absolute shame that is before the country.
May I just take a few more seconds just to point out that the example from China and Singapore, where they extradited somebody back to China from Singapore, this is precisely what this government seems to be unwilling to do, is to institute legal proceedings against Arjuna Mahendran and to then take that along to Singapore and have it enforced there and to recover the monies that he owes this country, because already the Presidential Commission of Inquiry has actually put a value to the minimum amount that he is responsible for. And we need to go after him, his assets, whether it is here, whether it is in Singapore or wherever. I just want to make that point, that that's why we brought this example of China and Singapore.